Brett Monty with Sika and also Mercury. We're under the same company brand, but we are different products. And this morning we're going to be doing real quick here a demo and talking about epoxy grout. Is that a big sin in our world? When you hear the word epoxy, doesn't most people want to run away? Yeah, he's laughing and shaking his head like, oh, geez. I'll tell you, I'm an epoxy fanatic. I really enjoy it. I always make the bet of you give me your best installer, the same size floor, give me my epoxy, I'll be at the bar drunk before he's ever done. Epoxies over the years have become so much more easier to use, user-friendly, cleanup on them. I know back in the old days, I've been doing this 34 years, and they were very difficult. You'd have to use hot water. Sometimes you'd have to have wax the floors to be able to clean them up, to heat the wax up to be able to clean it. They're no longer like that. Actually, you'll see how easy this is to use. We've only got 20 minutes on this particular product, and we've got another 20 minutes we're going to do finish the demos up with a little bit of surface prep on a product that we're kind of showcasing for large format tiles. It's a really unique product, but we're going to get into the grouting here with the epoxy. This is the SikaLevel-025 Epoxy Grout, SikaTile. Our booth is right behind you if you got any questions afterwards. But this is a 100% solid epoxy. So it is still an A and a B. As you can see down here, we've got our little units, and then we've got our filler powder, which is actually a powder-coated pin sand. So it will never fade. Also, when you mix it up, the color you see is the color you're going to get. John's going to mix it up for me here, and you can use a drill, you can use a hand. Once it's mixed up, it's there. The one unique thing about epoxies versus standard or even high-performance grouts is that time. I was talking to you about I can be at the bar drunk before the other guy's done. When you mix up traditional grout, you add your water, you measure it, you put it in, you mix your grout up. How long do you wait before you remix it? Are you supposed to wait before you remix it? Typically, it's going to be 10 to 15 minutes. Some manufacturers might say 5, but most manufacturers is going to have a 10 to 15 minute slake period. You're waiting for those polymers and the color pigments to get into it. If you ever mix grout too soon, or you get on it and take it out of the bucket too soon, you ever seen those little red streaks that come across? That's typically because it didn't finish kind of sitting there slaking and then did not get remixed. So that's time right there, okay? With an epoxy, we don't have to do that. The other thing with a standard traditional grout, once it's mixed up, you slaked it, you put it out on the floor, and this is always a trick question. How long do you wait before you can clean it up? Anybody? 5 minutes? Wrong. How long before you wait and clean it up? 20 minutes? Wrong. I'll tell you right now, you're all going to be wrong. Okay, so when you can firmly touch it and it doesn't transfer to your finger, that's when it's time to clean it up. How long do we wait? It depends. I know when I started many, many years ago, it was when it hazed over. That was time to clean it up. Well, that was back when most tile being installed was ceramic tile, a ceramic bisque. So it was actually pulling in some moisture. What is the majority of tile being installed? What is it made of today? Porcelains. Porcelains are impervious. They're a 0.05 less, or 0.05 absorption rate. So that means they're not pulling a lot of water. So it's going to haze over on that tile a lot sooner before it's ready. So that timeline of when we'd be able to physically look and say it hazed over and now it's time to clean it, we don't have that opportunity anymore. So now it's when you can firmly touch it and it doesn't transfer to your finger. If you get on it too soon, what happens? You pull it out of the grout joint, you'll end up with grout joints that are kind of U-shaped. The other thing is you're going to pull color pigments out of it, because it's what we consider a green grout or a fresh grout. So you could be pulling color pigments out of it and you'll end up with a blotchy grout. So now backing off of that and going back to the epoxy that John's mixing here, with an epoxy grout, I have none of that. I don't have water that I'm mixing it with. It mixes within the 2 little units that are inside the bucket. So it's an A unit, B unit, pre-measured. You pour them in, you pour your filler or your color, which is what we call a part C, into that unit, and we mix it. Do we have to wait and let it slake? No, we do not. So the minute it's mixed up and we're ready to go, we're ready to use the product. So we've taken that out of it. Now once we put it into the grout joints, how long do we wait before we have to clean it up? There is no waiting time. It's immediate. We can clean it up the minute it's in the grout joint. If you got a helper, you can have him start cleaning it up. It is cleaned up a little bit differently than a standard grout, but the methods are still the same. Now the one thing though is on a standard grout, you take a lot of water and you squeeze it onto that new grout and you go, oops, we kind of just ruined that area that's right there, or possibly ruined it. Well, with this, water is your friend. So as you see what John's doing right here, one of the number one things water is water's a lubricant. So he's actually taking a damp sponge and he's doing two things with it. He's wiping any contaminant or dust that might be on top of that tile away, but also he's putting a little lubricant down so that way when you go to spread the epoxy, it spreads a little bit easier. Epoxy is a very sticky product, okay? Very gummy product. But when you have that lubricant there, it actually makes it easier to push around. If you notice, he's using a green float, which is what we call urethane floats. It's a lot denser of a float if you feel it, if you're not used to it, versus a soft gum float. This has got a little harder edges, makes it a little easier to push this product around, but it also gives you a nice full joint. Okay, so he's put it in the grout joints. It's a little small job we're doing here. You can smear it, you can go it. The nice thing about this particular epoxy is if I'm doing walls, it's a 9-pound bag of filler. I'm going to use the whole bag because what we used to call Part D back in the day, which is your kind of non-sag properties, is built into the product. So when you're doing a vertical surface, it's going to stay in those joints. On a floor, we can hold back literally a pound of the product. It's not going to change the color, but it's going to make it smooth or make it push around a little bit easier. Did you hold any back, John? Nope, he mixed the whole thing. Okay, so he's got the whole thing in it. So either way, it can go floor to wall. Now, the one thing nice about this is we can go from a 16th inch joint all the way up to a 1/2 inch joint with this product, all in one. John's putting it into the joints. Who here's used epoxy grouts? 2, 3, we know the Latticrete guys have. That's easy. Okay, so how many of you guys are scared of epoxy grouts? Yeah? They're really not that easy, man, or not that difficult. They're extremely easy, especially now. You're going to see John getting on this and cleaning it up. He'll use a fair amount of water with it. He's got a sponge or a doodle bug. For those that doodle bugs are little white scrubby pads. He's got one built on it. You notice how much water he's got on that? He can actually take water and just put water onto those joints, and it's not going to distort the color or pull the color pigments up through it. The water is your friend in this application. He's actually scrubbing back and forth. If this was a darker color grout, or if you guys could actually see it really close up, I don't know if you can on the screens, you're going to see this white foam start to make itself within that mix. And that white foam is actually a surfactant. So we actually, fancy word for soap. So next time you go home tonight, tell, hey, do we have any surfactant in the shower? See if they can answer you. But surfactant's a soap. So we actually have an additive or a soap into this product that makes it easier to clean up. You ever have those epoxy situations where there's kind of this oily residue left behind after you clean it up? A lot of guys will put Dawn dish soap in their cleanup water, soft scrub in their cleanup water to help with that. This already has it built into it. It's not a hot water cleanup or warm water cleanup. You can use whatever you want to it, or whatever temperature water you want, and it cleans up. And so basically what John's done there is it's done. Now he's taken his doodle bug, he tooled his grout joints, he made them for the height that he wanted. He's going to take a little towel, just simply we're doing a kind of a quick installation method here in our 20 minutes, and he's just kind of dragging it across to pull up some of the moisture that's on top of it. Now you can take that rag, you can get it wet, and you can drag it across as the same way as a cleanup, but again, that kind of goes back to the old day of epoxies. Is the newer epoxies are so much easier to use versus what they were in the past. I think even our Latticrete guys will attest to that epoxies have changed over the years. Okay? So, any questions? Any questions on this? Yes, sir. Pot life, great question. So, John's got that mixed up. The warmer the weather, the faster it's going to go off. The cooler the weather, the lower it's going to stay. I've worked with this in many different environments and many different weather conditions, and my pot life has been roughly right around 45 minutes. It's longer than actually traditional grout. When epoxy actually has it, since it's a chemical reaction, epoxy actually gets softer before it gets harder. If you were to look at it on a scale, it'll actually, what we mixed it up at, let it sit here a few hours, it'll actually get a little bit softer, and then it will start to get harder after that point. So there's a down curve to that. So, but we've got about 45 minutes with this particular epoxy. in a pot life, which if it takes you that long to grout, then I'd consider, you know, because we all know typically grout you just pour it out and smear. This doesn't smear as easy, but it's still a pretty quick process with it. Any other questions with that? No? Okay. So now we're going to do a product over here called our Patch 025, SikaLevel Patch 025. This is a very unique product. In the industry, and I can honestly say in my 35 years in the industry, as well as my entire family being in the tile industry, is tiles have grown, right? When I started in the industry, typical floor tiles were 8x8. And now the 8x8's gone the way of the dodo bird, and now we're talking large format tiles. Any tile with one edge greater than 15 inches, right? So most of the floor tiles going down are plank tiles or 12x24s, these great big tiles. What do we need most of all when we're talking surface prep? A flat floor, correct? A flat floor really makes a job go a little bit quicker. You're not using much mortar. Should you be using mortars to level out your floor as you're going? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. A mortar is not intended to do that. So you use products that are made to do that. And one of these products that we have is the 025 Patch. This is a really unique product in the sense that it's not the type of patch that you would see out there where you're taking a trowel and you're smearing it around and working with it, what I call labor intensive. This is actually a product that is kind of a hybrid between a self-leveler, which most of us have probably used or seen self-levelers, but it's also a patching compound. So it's kind of got the best of both worlds. It's a 25-pound bag. You mix the product up, you'll see that it's a very fluid product. Not as fluid as a self-leveler, but it's very fluid. What's really unique is it's made to be screedable. Does everybody understand what we mean by screedable? So if you're in a concrete market like Florida, where most of your substrates are concrete, you go into a floor and you might have some undulations, or what I refer to as bird baths in those floors. Typically you'll take a patch, you'll fill it in, flatten it out, and come around it. What if you had a product that is a patch that is made for this, that you can actually pour out on the floor, you can take a straight edge, screed, and drag it across the floor, filling in the low spots, and it actually kind of seeks its own level. I can take that trowel and push it where I need to, and it'll actually self-heal on top of itself, as long as it's still fluid. Okay, so it's very much like a self-leveler, not as fluid, but it's very unique. They're gonna show you guys when we pour it. Our piece of wood's not supposed to look like this. This is what happens when you leave it in rain and then humidity and bring it into a dry area. But does this floor meet tolerance? No, no, but I've seen floors like that. But it's a good example because we're actually going to make it a flat floor, as long as we can hold it. Hopefully it doesn't bend on us. But again, you'll see this product, it's very unique. What we really want to show you is the properties of that self-healing technology, where you can drag that screed and you pick the screed up and you get all those drops that kind of drop back down on it. Normally you'd have to come back and wipe those back in. If this is still fluid, they just drip right back into it. It's very not labor intensive. It's most patches, and we have those patches where you really have to flat trowel those and work them and get the smoothness that you want. This is a particular product that is actually made to look this fluid. It's made to work like this. We can build this up to a 1/4 inch in single pours. Again, it's not a self-leveler, it's a patching compound with those kind of hybrid technologies to it. So we're not building it up over that 1/4 inch. Again, this really works well for those areas where you're screeding that floor. Any of the concrete markets. We can use it over wood. Over wood, this product's gonna be used just like this. Anything over 1/2 inch by industry standards requires metal lath. This is made to go to a 1/4 inch, but with wood over wood applications, instead of mixing it with water, we're gonna mix it with a latex. It does have polymers in it, but we wanna be able to get that mechanical and chemical bond at the same time. But I don't know if that camera's on that and you guys can see that. Pour a little bit more out there and run your trowel through it so they can actually see how it heals on itself. Yeah, just run it through it and you'll see. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's actually healing back in on itself. As long as it's still in a fluid state, it's going to fill back in on itself. Once it starts to dry, you run the trowel through it, it's actually going to leave the trowel marks. But if you guys can see, this will dry as smooth as you see it right there. It dries extremely smooth. It does have a sand aggregate to it. We don't always recommend it for embossing It's going to be more of a patching compound or a skim coat compound. What I typically tell people is when you need to build up a 16th inch or higher, this is the perfect product for it. Any questions on that? How are we doing on time? So, with that being said, is we've got this, we've got the epoxy. Now, going back to the epoxy, the one question is that I didn't get is how long does it take before we can walk on it? That's going to be the one con that we're going to find over a standard grout. It's about 24 hours. It's just keeping somebody off of it for 24 hours. It is, like I said earlier, it goes through that stage where it actually gets softer before it gets harder. So we're going to keep traffic off of it for 24 hours. Once it's dry, it is 100% chemical resistant. I've always used the analogy, I have epoxy, and this is a true story, I have epoxy grout in my bathroom floors because I have 5 boys, including myself, at my house. Most of us know where I'm going at with this, aiming issues. Standard grouts just aren't going to hold up to that. A chemical resistant grout is going to hold up to that. But you guys see how easy this was to use? I mean, for a typical grout job, if this was even a standard grout, our SikaTile 800 grout, we'd be waiting at this point in time. We'd probably just be finished grouting after letting it slake. And then we'd have to wait, could be 20 minutes, could be up to 45 minutes, till we get to that point where we can touch it firmly and it does not transfer to our fingers. That's when it's time to clean up. Any questions on those? I'll finish up with one thing here. SikaTile along with Mercrete, oop, that fell over. We carry the patent on a dustless formula. You guys ever heard of dustless mortars, dustless grouts, dustless products? The 025 was not dustless, but it will be dustless. So basically what this means, guys, is, I'm not going to open it, I'm just going to shake them.
I'll open one if you want to.
Okay, you can open the bad one. Okay, so basically what this is 80% less dust. We carry the patent, like I said, and what this is doing is kind of revolutionizing the industry in the sense that when you go to pour, you guys saw when we poured that 025, you had that little dust cloud come out of it. Imagine if, go ahead and shake it up, John, if it was more like this. Ready? He's got a standard and I've got a dustless. See the difference between the two? Okay, so this is 80% less dust. What that means is we're using less water when we're mixing our products. We're less cleanup on the jobs. Let's say it's a rainy day and you're having to mix in the garage next to the homeowner's Mercedes. You know, we're always going to cover it, but this is going to be less dust on that job site. For us as manufacturers, it's less dust at our factories. For distributors, it's less dust at their place where it's sitting on the shelves. So it's a very unique patent that we have. I'll tell you, most of the guys like the way that it's actually changed the performance of the products. It makes things extremely creamy, extremely smooth without affecting the actual bond strengths and shear strengths of these products. So again, if you guys have any questions on these products we've been talking about, we've got the SikaTile booth and Mercrete combined right here behind us. We'll be here for a few minutes if you got any questions, but thank you very much.